Tamriel is an incredible place, the birthplace of the Elder Scrolls series and where it's been set since the very beginning. But what if it was set outside of Tamriel? Today I present to you Summerset Isles. Hey, how's everyone doing today? Welcome back to another episode of my Elder Scrolls 6 location discussion series. The series where I go through various locations in which the next Elder Scrolls game could be set, talk about the possibilities of being set there and what it would be like if they were to be set there. We're going to be discussing the flora and fauna, the quest potential, the geography of the location, a bit of the lore, and a couple of other things, so sit back and enjoy as we discuss the Summerset Isles. And remember, as always, I do read every single comment, so if you want to get joined in with the discussion, then be sure to leave a comment below. But first things first, what actually is Summerset Isles? Well, Summerset Isles is, as you can imagine, a series of islands based on, well, there's 12 islands in total, all based on a similar geographic theme, but there are three major islands: the island of Somerset, the island of Argonia, and the island of Artyom. The islands themselves are located west of Valenwood or southwest of Tamriel, and this entire province is basically the home of the Altmeri, who are the High Elves. So this is where the High Elves come from. And although these islands are a part of the Abetian Sea, this is considered a part of the Tamrielic Empire, so it is still tied in with Tamriel. And although this is more specifically for the High Elves, this is actually the original landing place of the Mer. If you don't know what the Mer are, that's essentially the collective term for all the elves. So essentially the elven people come from Somerset. Although it should be noted that this is, although widely believed to be that, it's more sort of a possibility that it's the original place. It's sort of assumed by the people of Tamriel that this is where the elves came from, but that's not necessarily been confirmed in history. A couple of things that should be noted about Somerset is that it was quite specific to the elves for quite a while, but recently, in the most recent eras, since sort of Tiber's Septim was around, it's become a much more travelled to location. A lot more people are going there, but that's pretty much as far as is going on. Just there's been a lot more travel there recently, but it hasn't been hugely inhabited for a long time. It also should be noted, according to the Elder Scrolls wiki, that Daedra worship is quite prevalent on this island. So if you are familiar with the High Elves, then you'll imagine that based on this area, there is going to be a lot of xenophobia, a lot of racism, because the High Elves do believe themselves to be the highest race, or more specifically, they're obviously the Thalmor do believe themselves to be greater than anyone else. So naturally, if this is their home, there's going to be a lot of xenophobia, a lot of racism going along there, so that's something that could be expected, although now that there's a lot more travel going on there as well, that might sort of dissipate a little bit. And that's mostly just because of the fact that the island has been sort of brought into the Tamrielic Empire, rather than being its own standalone thing. But naturally, if they're still there, there's still going to be some of that. It's just, split up a little bit. One notable point in its history was the Nascent Revolution, and essentially what this was when the Tamrielic Empire started to take them into their empire, and the new races started to move in a lot more. Most people are acceptant of this, but there were a lot of people who naturally were not okay with this, and so there was a bit of a revolution there. One part of that movement was the group called the Beautiful, and these were essentially the people who were the rebels against this movement to be more accepting. These are the ones who truly believed that they were the greatest people, hence calling themselves the Beautiful, and these guys basically went out of the way to destroy the monuments of the Altmer civilization, and they destroyed loads of great monuments and sacred grounds and stuff like that. So there has been a lot of dark history in the past with the sort of combat between those who think that they're the greatest race and that should be their own island, and those who are accepting of the new people coming in. And where we're at now, to grab a quote from the wiki here, Galmar Stonefist mentions after the Stormcloak's victory during the Civil War that an invasion of the Summerset Isles resides in the near future for the Nords. So as of right now, there's potential for a war, potential for an invasion from the Nords into the Summerset Isles, but we'll come back to that later in quest potential. But there is much more information that can be found on the wiki about the history of the place, and if you want to find more, I'll leave a link in the description. But if you've seen these episodes in the past, you'll know that they're more about talking about the place itself. So with that, we're now going to move into the first of the points that we're going to be going through, and that is the geography of the Summerset Isles. So as I mentioned earlier, there are actually 14 islands in total which make up the Isles of Somerset. However, the three main ones are the Isle of Somerset, Argonia, and Artyom. We also know a little bit of Ivea, but this is not considered one of the main three. It's just something we have knowledge on, whereas we don't have a great deal of knowledge on the other 8. So first up, we're going to be talking about Argonia. Argonia is a pretty big island. It's the second biggest island, actually, out of all the islands in the Summerset Isles, and it's considered to be the most beautiful. In fact, some even call it the crown jewels of the Isles of Somerset. In terms of geography, what what you can expect is a very beautiful area with a lot of nice views. It's by the sea, so there's a lot of seaside scenery and lovely views there, but there's such a vast array of colours, a lot of flora here, and a lot of nice trees. Just a very bright, colourful island with a huge variety of plants, very nice looking. There are also some cities here, such as Firsthold and Skywatch, and these cities are homes to a lot of Altmer, although these are the very friendly Altmer. These aren't like, you know, racist ones. These are basically the homes of the nicer guys. So Firsthold is probably the biggest city on this part of the island. This is essentially like, it's a seaside city, although it doesn't actually have a port. It's very built up. They do have a royal palace, and from that palace you can see the Abetian Sea. But something which is testament to how big it is, they also have a royal gardens and a royal maze, as well as a bunch of these unique plants called the canthleaf plants. So it has a lot of huge gleaming spires, as the wiki describes them. So it's a very pretty, very built up city with a royal palace. They do have hedge mazes, just very large, mountainous, foresty type area on the sort of coast of Oregon. Skywatch has a much more familiar geography in that it's a bit flatter but still on a hill. It's actually very similar to Whiterun in that it goes upwards across this hill with 3 distinct districts. The sort of royal district where the sort of king of it lives with all his guards, and then slightly lower down it has a park district, and then towards the bottom it has the merchants and resident district. It does also have a dock, so this one does have a dock where sailors can come in and bring, you know, merchants and that sort of stuff into the city. But this is much more like Whiterun in that it's on a hill and it's split into 3 different parts. This area has actually had a lot more issue with combat in the past, and it has had a variety of attacks from a variety of people through the first and the second era. And although this has been in the past, as I said, first and second era, this has resulted in some parts of Skywatch being destroyed, but there has been no combat there for a while. It's a much more bustling city now. And as a result of those 2 big merchant and trading cities, Oregon is one of the biggest merchant-based and selling parts of Somerset. Fulkelgard is the last major city on this island, and this is another district-based city, although not specifically labelled. You've got the South District, which has the docks and the ships in it, where people will arrive from places like Daggerfall. You've got the West District, which has the marketplaces, the guilds, and the inn. The North Central District, which is where the bank and the temple are, and then the North Eastern District is the residential area, and the only place you can actually get entrance into the city, bar the docks. Next up we have Artyom, which is the 3rd largest island in the Summerset Isles, and this place is home to the Sigic Order, an order of ancient people from which the Mages Guild were developed, and these guys are essentially like the gods of magic. They're really knowledgeable and really strong within magic. The Mages Guild were developed from those guys, and these guys' headquarters are located in Artyom, so this is where they sort of come from and, I guess, live. It also should be noted that this island, and I quote, has a tendency to disappear off the face of Nirn, so there could be some mysterious things going on there that we don't know about. And in fact, further on that, it's actually thought that this island disappeared about 100 years before Skyrim, meaning that if Elder Scrolls 6 was set there, it technically wouldn't be around, to our knowledge, although that could be a major point in the quest of its return, but we'll talk about that later on. In terms of the island's geography itself, it's very forested and woodlandy. There's a lot of farmland, a lot of pasture land there. There's also lagoons, very similar to the likes of a lot of Cyrodiil, with a lot of foresty areas. Attached to this island is an island called Silatar, which is an artificial island created by a young girl who later went on to be the Queen of Valenwood. This island is a very magical place, and obviously this is the home of the Sigic Order, so a lot about this whole island is going to be quite magical in aura, but this island specifically is quite magical just due to the fact that it is artificial, and it has been created to be the perfect place, so it's quite weird, quite a weird place to be in, but very mystical and just a very attractive place. Pink trees and crazy stuff like that. So now the biggest of the 14 isles, the most noteworthy and the one that is named after itself, is the Isle of Somerset. This is quite noticeably the largest island, as it is an archipelago island, and the majority of the population and resources are located on this island. This island is said to be very beautiful and very bright and sunny, with a lot of forested and farmland and parkish areas, just a very attractive place. The capital of this place is Alanor, and this is basically this cool like spire looking city which is on top of these rocks on the west coast of Somerset. As I said, this place is largely built up of these glass gleaming spires, and it is home of the Temple of Ariels, which is quite a famous temple on the island essentially. So it's a very beautiful spire based city. Also to be noted on the Somerset Isles is Etinur, which is one of the highest points in all of Tamriel. This is a huge massive mountain located on the Somerset Isles, and as I said, highest in Tamriel, so this could be a great location to visit. This could make for great views, especially with the graphics we have nowadays compared to the likes of Arena in the past. It could be absolutely amazing to go up to the top of this mountain and just take a look at the Summerset Isles, especially since we've noted that this is already one of the most beautiful places in all of Tamriel. It could be incredible to go up here and take this great view in. And on top of this cool mountain, to take this one step further, as if it already wasn't cool enough as it is the city of Cloudrest. This is a very naturally formed city in that it's made out of coral, vines, plants, just about anything naturally you can imagine. There's a lot of waterfalls cascading down from in between parts and sections, and it is very much built around the mountain. It's not, you know, on a flat area. It's built around where it is, and it's on top of the peaks and stuff, so it could be very interesting to try and walk around this. Just a very interesting style of building that is on multiple levels, very vertical, very cool looking city. So next we're going to move on to my favourite part, and that is the creatures. And it's hard to find out information about the creatures. There isn't a ton on the wiki or very many places at all. A lot of this information I've got is through other people's videos and Reddit, and I'll link all, you know, sources and stuff in the description as always, but that's what we're going to talk about next. So a big part of the island for me are the sunbirds of Alinor, and these are birds which are essentially said to be made of the sun of Nirn. So these are birds made out of the sun. They're like phoenixes, flame birds, pretty cool, and those are the sunbirds of Alinor. There's also a lot of fairies and sprites which we've seen in games before, in Skyrim and Oblivion we've had, and these are said to be living, since this is quite a forested area. There's going to be a lot of these fairy-ish sprite type characters, and probably a lot of those the Spriggans as well, and that type of thing. However, it should be noted that it is thought that a lot of these fairies are actually extinct today, but I think this could make some sort of play into the quest, and could be quite interesting, but again, we'll talk about the quest later. One particularly interesting creature I wanted to talk about are the Gyartius. Now, I may have pronounced it incorrectly, my apologies if I did, but these are essentially giant rock people. They're thought to be a variety of fae, a variety of fairy type thing, but they're essentially people who are formed out of, as I said, rocks, out of the earth. So they're basically mostly made of rock, but they'll have maybe vines or anything like that hanging out of them. And these essentially massive rock people. Also a huge part of the lore are these massive eagles which live on the island as well, and these are particularly important because these are a symbol of the Aldmeri Dominion. Next up we have Slode, and we've talked about these before. These are essentially big fat slug creatures, and I think these could play a huge part in the story, but we'll come to this later on. These guys essentially, they're huge, as you can see from the pictures I'm going to be showing, just really large, and they have a great mastery of necromancy and sort of biological combat. And these guys are hated, and it should be noted as well, if you've read up on the wiki on this, these guys have been invading a lot in the past, Summerset Isles a lot in the past, particularly in the first and second era. In fact, they have been known to destroy parts of Somerset in the past. In fact, there was actually an island called Aranorn Island, which was home to a huge mage academy in the past, in the first era, but in the first era, the Slodes invaded the island and completely destroyed the academy. So naturally, not only Tamriel, but the people of Summerset Isles have a large hate for the Slode. And before we get into the main event of the population of this island, there were also a lot of goblins and trolls as well can be found on the island, but the main event of course is the elves that live there. There are a couple of races that we haven't experienced before in the Elder Scrolls games, such as the Sea Elves, which will live on the island, but mostly, as mentioned earlier in the video, the vast majority of the population of this island are the High Elves. Now there are a ton of variety with the High Elves on this. It isn't just, hey, there's Ultima and there's also Thalmor. Since this is the original home of the Mer, of the elf kind, there is a ton of variety in not just elven kind, but specifically in Ultima as well. And we've mostly touched on the most important points of the Ultima earlier in the video, but this is a huge one. There are a lot of these Ultima people, and if you don't know much about the Ultima, these are essentially the closest to the Aldmeri, which were the purest of the elves, and that's come through basically selective reproduction, and they've just been very careful with that. The Ultima itself actually means high ones in their own language, so they think very high of themselves, and although a lot of people, a lot of these guys are quite snobbish, not all of them are racist. That's mostly just the Thalmor and other subcultures of Ultima. So the Ultima do make up the vast majority of the population of these islands, and so you will be seeing a lot of them basically. I'm not going to go too much into the lore and history of the Ultima themselves, or the religion or anything like that, because I'd like to discuss this more in the future in separate videos. However, it should be noted that they do have a variety of different gods. They have a devil figure, they do worship a couple of different deities as well from the past, and they also worship some of the Daedra as mentioned earlier. Since the Oblivion Crisis, a lot of the Daedra, like Mehrunes Dagon for example, are actually hated naturally because of the Oblivion Crisis, but they do still worship some Daedra, like Meridia for example. So now we're going to move on to the quest potential, and a lot of this is down to the thoughts that I have specifically, because this is more sort of speculation at this point rather than talking about what we know. And I feel like a lot of the quest potential here comes down to certain species returning, for example the Slowed. Now as I mentioned earlier, the Slowed were huge invaders in the past, so they definitely could be a part of this story as they're definitely not extinct. Now this has huge potential because I think they could just be a little bit of a part of the story, but they have been known to fully invade places of the islands and even destroy certain of the smaller islands, so this could definitely have the potential for like a huge all-out war against like a large invasion of Slowed. On similar thoughts with invasion, the Sea Elves were known to have invaded in the Third Era, which was much more recent than the First and Second Era to say the least, so the Sea Elves could have the potential to invade as well. And a similar story that I've mentioned could be a possibility in previous videos is another civil war. I don't necessarily think this is going to be what they go for, since that's essentially what happened with the previous game, but they could, you know, mess around with the theme and the reasons and the cause for the civil war. And I think this could be a good one because we do obviously have the beautiful from the previous eras in the revolution in previous eras. And so this could definitely be a possibility. The beautiful could make a comeback, they could return bigger and stronger, they could sort of build themselves up as like a new era of people joining the beautiful and becoming the beautiful. So there could be huge potential of a civil war here between the people who are essentially really racist and only want the perfect ultimate on this island, and between the people who want it to be inhabited and shared by all. So there's huge potential for a civil war here. And lastly, another good potential is the Fae, or the fairies, and the sprites and those sort of people returning. As I mentioned earlier in the video, these beings can be considered godlike, and although they have been considered extinct, if they're considered godlike as well, I don't see any reason for them not to make a return, especially since some of them are really powerful. There's a variant of them which are essentially these huge massive giants which are bigger than trees, so these are like huge people and definitely could be tough bosses and people to go against, and would definitely need some sort of war to I guess, avert these people from taking over, or these godlike fairy people from taking over the island again. And lastly, I think it could be cool if we do bring the Thalmor back into it, to have some sort of, not necessarily a bigger war, but if they're trying to just raise themselves back up, because that could naturally bring the Psijic back into it, because the Psijic essentially disagree with the Thalmor and the way they operate, so actually, this could be great to bring the Psijic back in, because although we have the Mages Guild, which has come from the Psijic Guild, the Psijics are essentially just really powerful mages, and this is not something we've really dealt with before. So it could be cool to take part, maybe become a Psijic, and just have some fun with the Psijic Order, and I think that would feel natural and not forced if the Thalmor were in the game as well, so they could have the Thalmor and the Psijic brought in at the same time and could feed off of each other. So there is huge potential for quests on the Summerset Isle, plenty of different options they could use, options that they could blend together, options that they could go with just one or the other. There's plenty there, but that is going to do it for today's video. Somerset Isles, very nice place. The likelihood of it being set there, probably not that great, since there are other places such as Valenwood and Elsweyr, which would probably make more sense to move on, especially with the Second Great War coming up. It's also, it is massive, and it's very different. There's a lot to think about just because it is very dense and very beautiful as a result of that, but there's a lot to consider when putting this together and when making this. They did say that the projects coming up are bigger and greater than anything that they've done before, so after those projects, who's to say that they can't make something as much of a spectacle as Somerset Isles? I think it's definitely a possibility. It's just not very, you know, friendly to newer players, which is definitely a big thing game developers are looking for nowadays when developing sequels, especially Bethesda with the previous Elder Scrolls games with Dishonored 2, etc, etc. But I think regardless of whether this gets picked or not, this will always be a great place for an Elder Scrolls game to be set, not necessarily just because of its quest potential, but because of its just pure, unnatural beauty. And with that, that's going to do it for this episode of my Elder Scrolls 6 location discussions. Coming up, we still have Hammerfell and Akavir to cover. If you're interested in checking out any of my previous My Elder Scrolls videos, there'll be links in the description to the location discussion video playlist, as well as my general Elder Scrolls playlist. And remember that after the New Year's, I'm going to be doing facts and lore videos as well. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you're interested, there'll be information to the wiki and the unofficial wiki to get some extra information on the video, and I definitely do suggest reading up on those, as well as watching Roshank's video, who helped to research this video as well, or whose video I used to help research this, I should say. Other than that, a like would be greatly appreciated. These videos do take quite a long time to put together, to research, to edit. Next week's video is going to be much more scripted and much more thought out. I'm going to do it over the course of the week. But other than that, thank you very much for watching. My name's Yetihype, subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace, guys. Thank you for watching.